Okay, so we start. Welcome everyone. This is the first seminar of webinar of CyberSec for Europe, from which you will hear from our coordinator, Professor Kai Rannenberg. We're very happy to start this webinar today with Dr. Antonio Kung, that will introduce himself later, but Antonio is familiar to many people involved in the cybersecurity and privacy ecosystem, has been participating in many research projects. I had the honor to participate with him also. Last project we did together was Create IoT, and we worked very closely in that coordination and support action. Antonio is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Trialog, and you will find more info on his bio also on our CyberSec for Europe website, on the webinar's webpage. The title of today's webinar is Integrating Ecosystem Perspective in Cybersecurity Standards, which is a key topic for CyberSec for Europe, especially VP8. And I thank our colleagues from VP8 and VP9. I want to remind all the participants that this session will be recorded. So by participating to this session, they agree to be recorded. I'm very happy to give the floor to our coordinator, Professor Kai Rannenberg. Kai, you have the floor.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Pasquale. If you could also make me presenter,
yeah,
that could help. So thanks a lot, Pasquale, and thanks a lot for organizing that. And actually, maybe my most important function here is actually probably to thank Antonio and for making himself available for this presentation. I know Antonio for a long time already, because he's very active in working group 5 of SC27 and actually also in a few other working groups where he's doing great contributions, including participating in the drafting committee, which is a really hard work. So when normal standardization takes 10 of your hours, and drafting committee takes another 6 of your hours per day, and Antonio is continuously doing that and participating in that and contributing, and that I'm very thankful. And then he still takes time and for presenting here. That's really great. He's also taking care of a nice web-based presentation of the groups that I suppose he's also going to refer to. But as a few people who are not maybe fully familiar with CyberSec for Europe, my job here is then to quickly give an overview of what is CyberSec for Europe. And background, you may have seen back 2 years ago this proposal for European Cybersecurity Competence Network and Center that the European Commission made. Actually, just a few days ago, the informal negotiation on the trilogue, fits to trilogue as a company from Antonio, has been concluded informally between the Parliament and the Council and the Commission to really start this whole project in the early beginning year. And also the location for that has now been decided to be Bucharest. And actually today is the day, I think probably the day where the last formal negotiations in the trilogue of this project are going to be happening. So now what does that have to do with CyberSec for Europe? CyberSec for Europe is one of the 4 guinea pigs that are trying to do this cyber competence network and center and trying to play out what is actually going to happen there. So there's 4 of these projects. The other ones are Echo, Concordia, Sparta, that are doing work and see how can such a cybersecurity competence network work to overcome fragmentation, to get things going. And this is the CyberSec for Europe guinea pig here. And you find, for example, somewhere in Switzerland, you find, of course, you find Pasquale. And with Archimede, you find Frankfurt University, you find the number of other institutions, obviously spread over 22 countries with 43 partners. And I also am happy to welcome, for example, Dirk Kuhlmann, who is active in the Sparta trial and so on. And now, how does this work with standardization? Let's go one slide further. This is the overview picture of how work in CyberSec for Europe is organized. And it has basically one big area to deal with the governance of the new cybersecurity center. So that has been already fitting into the regulation that is coming up. And it will go further contribute to how the internal regulation is going to happen. It does something in the area from research and innovation to industry. So how do you build the future research roadmaps? And in the case of CyberSec for Europe, how do you do that out of relevant application areas? Then education, training, and standardization. And we come back to that one in a minute. And then communication and community building. For example, where Package 9 is involved in that one, organizing this webinar. So now let's have a look at this part of it. Let's see where that somehow you can hopefully see this the pointer. And skills, certification, standardization. These are 3 work packages in CyberSec for Europe. And indeed, I think CyberSec for Europe from the 3 pilots is the only one that decided that standardization in itself is worth enough to have its own work package and not just to be seen as a subtopic of certification. Of course, you need standardization for certification, but it has more value. So from that point of view, I'm extra proud, of course, that we have this meeting and that we have Antonio here to tell us more about his perspective on standardization and how it works beyond certification, and which actually he's a great speaker about, because he knows all of the development influences that standardization can have. Is also, and CyberSec for Europe decided to start a category C liaison with SC27 and working groups 2 and 5, and especially 5 is where, of course, you can meet Antonio, basically to make sure that European developments are also reflected in standardization. And if you want to see what really has been happening, there's 2 deliverables that you find on the CyberSec for Europe website on standardization plans for CyberSec for Europe, including an analysis on what is relevant and a standards metrics on which topics are relevant. And with that, I'm more than happy to say you can also get involved with CyberSec for Europe if you haven't been yet. And these slides will also be made available. But I don't want to take more time away from Antonio, who is now, I think, perfectly fit and the best person that I could ever imagine to open up our webinar series on standardization and showing how relevant and important it actually is. And with that, I think, yes, let me see whether I can get rid of my screen again.
I'll make Antonio presenter, Kai.
And perfect. And hands over to Antonio.
Many thanks, Kai. And I am very happy to give the floor to Antonio now for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Pasquale. I'm very honored to be the first speaker of this series, this webinar series. And let's go. I have like 40 minutes before the Q&A session. Okay. Let's see if I... Okay, so I'm going to talk about myself, a little bit publicity about the project which is sponsoring me, and then the topic. Okay. So myself, I'm the CEO of Trilog. We work on IoT systems. And I've been my background is cyber physical systems, and I've been very much involved in the research projects on privacy and how I started working on standardization. Okay. So I started in 2015. That's where I met Kai in Mexico, I think. Okay. And then I started to work. You see, I'm working on privacy standards on the right and lots of other standards related to cyber physical systems. I put only the standards in which I have really a strong involvement, and I'm very proud to mention the red one here, 27550, privacy engineering, which is the first standard I was working on, okay, and which is now available. I'm also working for IPAN, which is this informal community launched by EDPS, and in 2015. They proposed that I am in charge of a wiki where we mention we present the current standards, and you can see that just one thing is half of them are available, but half of them are new work items or new developments. So it's very interesting to have a look, because then you have a sense of what's going on. Okay, and by the way, this page is really heavily accessed. So just a word for participating, and we mentioned liaison, and I'm in charge of 2 liaisons, PDB4E, which allows me to access PC317, and Prepare, which was the first liaison I negotiated with Kai so that I could participate to SC27. And you can see there are many other liaisons, including, I didn't forget, CyberSec for for Europe. Or there's a probably typo here, but that doesn't matter. So we can participate through liaison, but we can also from European projects, but also from these initiatives like IoTI, BDVA, probably EXO has some also liaison. And also you can participate through a national mirror group. And they're just mentioning how my participation is officialized is through either the liaison or the national mirror groups. Okay. Now, just a few words about PTP4E. This is a project which combines privacy protection, engineering, and models. Okay. And the idea is that models probably is something that is really understood from the past, and that we use it. Models are processable. That's the important thing. You can use them to either generate or to verify things. Well, the first thing we are doing is to integrate to engineering consideration on privacy. And you see here 3 standards which we are using. And actually only one of them is published. The others are under making. So it shows that sometimes it's important to participate in standardization, in particular in some research projects. We are working on 4 processes: requirements, risk assessments, privacy by design, and assurance. And those are the tools we are working. Okay, and as probably you're all familiar, in H2020 we have consortium, we have partners, and each one is bringing its brick into the project. So now I'm getting to the core of my presentation: ecosystem-based vision of security standards. Here are, let's say, all the topics I want to mention, and you will see I will go through all of them. Okay. The first is the need for coordination between stakeholders. And the first thing is that we're talking today about system of systems. I'm taking a standardization viewpoint, even though system of systems have been around for maybe 15 years. But those 3 standards were published in 2019. Okay, and basically it says that you have a system and it will interact with other systems. Therefore, you have a system of systems. And what it shows is that the red arrows are the additional stuff that creates what we call an emerging behavior. Okay, and this is what we have to take into account in terms of cybersecurity. What about the risk of this emerging behavior? So this is a slide I came up with, but I copied and pasted the initial slides of those standards. Okay, and where you could have a risk of a system Y, a risk of a system X, but you put them together, you have the risk of the system of system. Okay, and just in a nutshell, today it's not well taken into account. I haven't seen any standard on that, and the practice is very difficult. One of the reasons being that the risk analysis here and the risk analysis here might not be compatible or interoperable. So we have a huge issue here. Okay. Some other examples. So this one I'm showing all the time because when you consider smart cities and privacy, you have to consider all the stakeholders that are involved. The stakeholder, the citizen, data controllers, a joint data controller, data processor, integrator, and supplier. Okay, and all the red stuff here that I'm putting are interactions that might deserve some standardization. Okay, if you look at them, only very little. So I'll mention there are a few things. Over the PIA, you have something. Okay, but the whole picture is missing today. Now, another example which I am working on is CITS, Cooperative Intelligent Transport System, is a strategic move from Europe, but also in the world, to make sure that actually vehicles can avoid accidents because they will exchange information. Okay. And this has been around for about 15 years. We've been working there. And actually, I was introduced to privacy issues through those projects. Okay. And sorry, so just went too fast. So you can see that the idea is that the vehicles have a capability to transmit information about themselves. Okay. So basically, position, acceleration, direction, and things like that. And the other vehicles can figure out whether it's okay or whether an accident will occur. Okay. Not only that, but you might have stations on the roadside that do the same, and they can do indications. There is an accident in front of you, please brake. Okay. And in order to ensure that we are not then tracking a car and creating privacy issue, all the cars have pseudonyms, okay? And therefore you have something we call a pseudonymization authority. Don't want to get into details, but the specification is rather sophisticated. But at the end of the day, what happens is you have many stakeholders. You have the operators of vehicles. So there's something called CAM, but it's a cooperative awareness message operator. Okay, and so you might have one per car and one per brand. Okay, and there be in front of them, you will have the roadside units and the use case operators or the roadside operators. They will collect data and maybe do applications on traffic efficiency. And then you have here the technology people, okay? And you can see that this is an ecosystem. And when it comes at the risk level or cybersecurity, you have to collaborate because you cannot just protect this guy. You have to protect the whole thing. Another application domain is what we call data space, and is a huge, let's say, priority in Europe. You might have heard of Gaia X, which is a French-German initiative to create the future data space in Europe. So I just took a slide here where they show the architecture. It's a bit complicated because there are many issues related to federations, that is actually people working together, and identity and trust, and sovereign data exchange, okay? And another picture, this is from McKinsey, they show that basically when you have this, you have different types of stakeholders: data providers, data marketplace, data consumers. And again, here you have many organizations, many stakeholders, and need to understand how cybersecurity is handled there. One example, and this is a project in which I was involved, is Automat H 2020, which focused, which completed 2 years ago, and which focused on the vehicle data marketplace. Okay, you can see here you have vehicles, they collect information, then it's made public, and you have a marketplace. So this is the vision that is actually showing this. So you have here 4 types of stakeholders. You have the OEM, so this is a car manufacturer. You have the cloud, the storage manager. You have here a data marketplace, and here the service provider. For instance, weather broadcast service provider. Okay, and of course you can see that you need to exchange those data. They call it common vehicle information model. You have here interoperability requirement. Okay, so when it comes to cybersecurity, you need to carry out a risk analysis of each system, but they must be somehow synchronized, okay? And we have a deliverable, which is actually here. You can have a look. It goes much more in detail, but it includes a section on the security and privacy for this component, okay? And so you see the term typical here, because actually it's a generic way of doing edit, looking at it. So it could be used for, let's say, the real implementation. But you must have the same here. You must have the same here, and you have to have the same here. Okay. So basically, you have one security and risk analysis to perform per type of stakeholders. Okay. And here it's simpler, because we try to model or to create an ecosystem where you only have 4 types of stakeholders. The reality could be more complex, but what is at stake is you need to do those cyber security analysis and put them together. So there is a collaboration need. And this was reflected in this standard, which is available, okay, big data security and privacy, and which includes a section of governance, okay, which includes a section on guidance at the organization level. So you are part of the big data ecosystem, you must do this. Then it includes a section at the ecosystem level, okay, and actually it includes an example, and of course I provided this Automat H.20 example in the annex, okay. Just for you to know, as an anecdote, I had to fight to have this section on board because people didn't understand it, and I got some help from, I have to say, from the US. They said that, yeah, it's important to have the ecosystem stuff, okay. Now, another standard which I'm editing and which will be published this year, or early next year, is 27570 Privacy Guidelines for Smart Cities. It includes processes that are exclusively focused on this collaboration issue, okay? Governance, risk management, data sharing, engineering, citizen engagement. Basically, it says things like this. So you have someone that is in charge and collaborates with the other stakeholders of the ecosystem, and they agree on how they do the things in terms of cybersecurity or other aspects, okay? Okay, so I showed the need for coordination between stakeholders. I already explained a little bit some standards that are addressing that. Okay, but the problem today, which is not solved, is we are coping with the standardization maze. Okay, so let's start with SC27 because this is the one where I started, and of course where Kai is leading. Okay, but actually I need to liaise with SC7 for cybersecurity engineering, which actually personally I did. I need to integrate cybersecurity in architecture. So I need to liaise with AG8, which is working on meta-reference architecture. I will come back to that probably. I need to integrate cross-cutting concerns. We have a working group 3, trustworthiness. There is another working group that is created, Kai, also a member, PC317, Privacy by Design for Consumer Goods and Services, which takes a privacy and consumer viewpoint and is separated. So we need to liaise, okay? Cloud computing is provide very interesting things about how to handle data, in particular interoperability, data sharing agreements. So I need to check, okay? Then we have AI, and we need to see whether cybersecurity is well integrated in AI systems, okay? And of course, you have domains and you have SC41, IoT digital twins. I need to see whether we can integrate cybersecurity in IoT and digital twins. So this maze, actually, it's my personal maze because I'm working on all of this, okay? But actually, it's even more complicated than that. So getting back to the impact on architecture, okay? What we see today is there is a proliferation of reference architecture standards. Okay, so I mentioned a few of them. I'm not involved in all of them, but I know very well, for instance, this one, IoT, in which I'm involved. Knowledge engineering, I will be involved. The last 4, I will be involved, and the big data, I was involved to start with. Okay, but the problem is, if you look at all those standards and put them together, you are not guaranteed that this is consistent. Actually, there are lots of inconsistencies because they were not devised and specified according to a common scheme. And that's the goal of AG8. Okay, how do we align those standards? And we are using actually 42010, which is an architecture description. So you see there is an iconic representation of 42010 here, where you have here a number of things. So just to show to you, actually, you are required when you specify an architecture to specify, first of all, the expectations. Okay, so what is the system? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the concerns? And what are the viewpoints you want to have? And what are the type of models you want to see? Okay, and then you have the resulting architecture, which is the work where you provide this. Okay, most of or many of those standards somehow respect that, but not entirely. Okay, and so we need to have this huge work of alignment, which JDC1 is undertaking. It's going to take several years, but we are starting. Okay, and one big message I want to mention is this one: is that at the end of the day, architectures are expressed through models. Okay, and this is where we come back to something called model-driven engineering or model-based system and software engineering. Okay, and this has a huge impact, I think, with the way we will build systems in the future, or we build the systems right now already. Okay. Now, an example is the 3141 IoT reference architecture, which is already available, this standard. We are working on edition 2. And we are now using this approach. We have viewpoints and models, and you can see that we will focus on this vision where at the implemented ribbon, you have a component model, which is something like that, okay? And very important is in architecture, you have the trustworthiness of viewpoint, okay? And the trustworthiness viewpoint, it's a little bit complicated, but you can see here X by design, and something that I will show to you, the issue structuring model. Okay, and of course, this is where cybersecurity, privacy, and security will be integrated. Okay. So let's go for the impact of trustworthiness. Okay, and the issue structuring model. Okay, so this is a request that the architectures provide this thing. So to give you an example, and this is an example of the past. For those of you who were working on dependability, we have a paper, that's a seminar paper on the taxonomy for dependable security computing, and you got something like this, okay, where you say that dependability and security included some attributes, some threats, and some means, okay. And actually, if you look at how this is handled elsewhere, it's nearly the same. So, for instance, in 2934, we have something like this. We have the attributes: security, privacy, safety, reliability, resiliency, and some means, okay. So it's very likely that future architectures, reference architecture, will include something like that. A generic part where we include the stakeholders, characteristics, problems, means, and then we specialize. Obviously, in some domains, safety might be more important than privacy. And so you have to have, if we have an architecture at the generic level, you still have to specialize. So that's the work we are trying to do concerning trustworthiness. Now, the other issue is life cycle. Okay, I didn't put all the slides, so I might make a comment of in addition to that. When it comes to life cycle, we have 15288, which is the Bible. It's a very sound and a very sustainable standard because it does not impose a life cycle model. It just shows the processes and explain them, and you are free to pick up your life cycle model. Okay, but once you have that, this is very general and it doesn't cover well cybersecurity. So the first thing we did, and this is actually 27550, is to identify those processes where privacy was important and to describe them. And this is actually the result of 27550. And you can see that we selected only a few of them and explain why we need them. But just to give you one example, you have here in technical management, you have the risk management process, and the risk management process should include the privacy risk management, okay? And this is exactly what 27550, it's explaining in an incremental way the additional stuff you have to do to integrate privacy engineering, okay? So just before, I want to say that I didn't show this slide, but when it comes to AI, there is something important because the life cycle is a little bit complicated. You have the life cycle of the training system and the life cycle of the thing that is resulting. Okay, so when you do machine learning, you have the machine learning phase, and then the system is executing. Okay, and therefore this is something that is also new that will have to be taken into account. Now I'm getting back to user empowerment, okay? And this is where it becomes especially important in when it comes to privacy. We have one property which we have explained actually in 27550, which is used. It's called intervenability, and it allows the user, the owner of PII, to intervene. Okay, and it is also related to the fact that it requires transparency features. Okay, and we are working currently on 27556 privacy preference management, where we are actually advising architects to have a separation between the management of privacy preference and the handling. Okay, and this allows us to show clearly that the PI principal can access this management to specify his preference. And we added a new role or stakeholder, privacy preference administrator, in charge of this. And then, of course, the PI handling is led by the PI controller or processor. Okay. There's no, in this sense, there's no recommendation about whether the must be separate or not. So the PI controller could be itself the PI preference administrator, It's recommended to do this because the role are clearer. And of course, in the future, you could have another company that is playing this role so that you create even maybe better trustworthiness for the solution, in particular for data space applications. So I'm going to skip that one. Just say that this is the architecture of privacy preference management. You include 4 items. And you can see here you have transparency administration, consent administration, privacy preference administration, and the rules for making sure that the PI processing is done properly. Okay. Now, interoperability issue. Okay. So I'm getting back to the 3141 IoT interoperability issue. So at the architecture level, we have components with capabilities. And the supporting capability here will include trustworthy capability, okay? And particular security, privacy, and things like that, okay? So one example is if you have encrypt some data, it's going to be stated there, okay? And if those components are inserted a little bit dynamically in the ecosystems, you need to have interoperability, okay, of this thing. So I am buying a component from organization A or for organization B. Is the competing component doing the same thing, but is it applying the same level of trustworthiness? So this is a problem of interoperability, okay? And therefore, in IoT, in SC41, we are working on those levels of interoperability. And in particular, on semantic interoperability, we will need to have ontology of cybersecurity and behavioral interoperability. We have a model of how this IoT component is taking care of some cybersecurity issues. Okay, so again, we see here the notion of models. Okay. Another example is in SF38, which is cloud computing. They have a work in progress called a data sharing agreement framework, okay, which actually was more, well, maybe I'm wrong. Actually, it was covering both security and privacy, but it was not covering well the problem of ecosystems. So this picture is in the standard. It's from me, and you can see that you might have here I think it's cloud provider CP1, which is actually a part of 2 ecosystems. So it's handling 2 domains, and those stakeholders, they exchange data sharing agreements, okay? And of course, data sharing agreements includes all the obligations which all of them have, okay? So one thing I want to mention is we lack the coordination of those data sharing agreements. Maybe we will not have a clear way of handling those things, okay? But we also need to see that in some cases, a provider might be involved in 2 different ecosystems, and therefore the protection between this must be even stronger, okay? Then I'm going to the assurance of complex systems, okay? And I have only one slide, but maybe I can elaborate. Okay. In SC27, you have a working group, which is working group 3, working on the common criteria and the evaluation of security. Okay. It's a very important domain because lots of subsystems of security are being certified, and actually the standards are very strong but very specific. So we're trying to look at that from a system point of view, and I am in charge of a preliminary work item, cybersecurity of complex system based off common criteria. Okay. And the idea is, again, to use models, okay? And so that on top here, you have a security model of your system, which could be a complex system, and which you can validate through model checking, okay? You can have lots of, let's say, approaches to do the validation that the security model is okay. But then what is important is, of course, the integration of this into an overall architecture. So here we have the implementation of the integration, okay? And you would have to have other schemes to check that the integration is done properly. If you are able to verify that the model is correct and the integration is correct, maybe you have the solution for future security assurance, okay? So that the assurance would use evidence provided by those two, let's say, verification scheme approach, and then validate that the solution meets some properties, okay? So this is currently the vision we have. But I think it's a very long undertaking. I forgot to mention, but a preliminary work item can last 3 years, okay? And I think this will like at least a couple of years. I'm working with actually a person that is in charge of providing, has an idea about very simple security models, okay? And we need to work this also in collaboration with the academics and the people doing model-driven engineering, so that at the end of the day, this can happen. Okay. Once you have this, I just want to mention the common criteria. They include the notion of protection profiles, and they have two types of requirements: the security function requirements, they call it SFR, and the security assurance requirement, they call it SAR. Okay, and the ideas would be that you could apply this for this kind of thing. Okay, where you have security assurance requirement for the protection profile at this level, and security function requirements the same here. Okay. One thing that I'm not mentioning here is that you could have a recursive way of assurance, because you would like to achieve the assurance of the system of system, but this could also rely on the assurance of some systems and some subsystem of the systems, okay? And of course, the overall assurance is an understanding that this works well, because we will rely on the security assurance of a subsystem to build the security assurance of the outer system, okay? And this is obviously an architecture issue, and therefore architecture and assurance, they must work hand in hand, okay? And you might have know that in Europe, but everyone, well, we're trying to see how we will do the certification of complex system, IoT system, and the like. Okay, and could be that the initial vision that we have in Europe is maybe a little bit simpler, but I hope that in the future it will go into that kind of directions, because I think that's the only way to address complex systems. So might have seen that my message is modeling is the next wave, or it's actually the current wave, but it has to be embraced more thoroughly. Okay, and there is a standard that is actually ongoing, 24641, model-based software and system engineering. Okay, it's very much a life cycle oriented project, because it shows to you 4 items. Okay, first of all, we need to understand what it is we want to model. Okay, and that's not obvious at all. Okay, and we need to define the objective and the scope of this, and to plan for their development, the resources and things like that. So it's a planning stuff. Okay, then you are going to build them. Okay, I give you an example. Okay, contact tracing for COVID-19. Okay, so we implement it, but maybe when it comes to privacy, you would like to have an understanding of the privacy protection model that you use. Okay, and particularly in France, we are using a version that is actually very much criticized, because the data is centralized at the end of the day, while you have solutions where data is decentralized. Okay, so this can be reflected in the specifications of the model. Okay, and once you have it, you build this. You agree on it. So you have, of course, if it is a privacy protection model, you have to make sure it's a good one. So you have to validate it. Okay, and then of course you might have to maintain it to support its use and things like that. Okay, so this is here. Only when you have done that, you can do the implementation, which is performing the engineering. So this is typically life cycle processes. And the idea is you will integrate during the life cycle processes the models that you have built. Okay, that's how it works. This standard is in the middle of his developer, I think CD level, committee draft level. So it's going to take about 2 years before it getting public. Okay. One thing I want to add is that I'm by luck the editors are French, okay, and I am in the national body mirror group of SC7, so I met them, and I have proposed to them to include an annex of this where we'll focus on cybersecurity. Okay, at least one on privacy and maybe one on security. So those of you who are interested, please contact me because they thought it's a very good idea because it would make the standard a win-win standard. Okay. Now in PTP4 we have worked a lot about. We are working on privacy, not on cybersecurity, on security, but only on privacy, and we are thinking about creating a community of open privacy models. Okay, so I showed to you what it contains. So first of all, you would like to have a repository of models for applications and how they are protected in terms of privacy. I mentioned the COVID-19. Okay, but we can also mention this CITS, cooperative ITS model, or a data space model. Okay, so the automotive stuff. Okay, so all those things can have models which explain how privacy implemented. Okay. And I have also to say that you don't have only one model. You have also many solutions. It's just that they are specified at a level that everyone can understand. And since it's open, everyone can have a look, okay, and criticize and say, this is okay, this is not okay, and the like, okay. So this would be the first type of models we have in mind. We also have models for privacy engineering. So it could be that in order to build privacy protection, you need to have some design strategies, and you could use, let's say, schemes that are provided by the academics. In particular, for instance, Joachim Hopman has provided the 4+4 design strategies for privacy protection. Okay, so we have two types of models: the models used by the engineers to build models. Sorry for that, it's a bit recursive. And here, this is very important that people understand the models engineers build for applications. Okay, so here is the tooling level, and here is the application level. Okay, and those are important. And I don't see a reason why this committee cannot be worldwide, and it could support domains, and it could support profiles, because maybe some models are better for GDPR, and others are better for other types of regulation. Okay, and since it's open, the governance is very much like what we do in open source. Okay, we do whatever we want. It's just that it's open. Okay, I'm done. Okay, so Pasquale, the floor is yours if you want to go into Q&A sessions.
Many thanks, Antonio, for this very rich presentation, and also many thanks also for handling this in the allocated time, so that leaves us with some space, good space, 15 minutes for Q&A. So since this is not a large group, we can have people either writing in the chat, or they can unmute themselves and ask the question directly to Antonio.
Start then.
Yes.
Actually, to one of your last slides, Antonio, I think it was 42, if I'm not mistaken. It was where you mentioned that where you mentioned recursivity. And I was actually wondering, is it really, maybe let's first go to the slide. Is it, I think it was where you mentioned it, but anyway, I had the feeling, is it really recursivity that you have there, or isn't it actually a layered setting that you have, let's say, a basic model, and then you have application-oriented or segment-oriented models on top of it? So one can have models on different levels of hierarchy, I could imagine. Or is there really a recursivity in it, and I didn't understand that?
Yeah, I'm using this term because there is a standard on requirement engineering, and they use this term. But because they say that when you come to requirements, you have the requirements that you come up with a system. Okay, so you do your life cycle, and so I'm building, for instance, a contact tracing system. So I am working on the requirements of that. And then in the contact tracing, you need the storage system. Okay, so then the storage system will have some more precise requirements. So this is the recursion that is the term, but it's it's the component part. It's the whole part approach of a model. Okay, so you have system and subsystem. So maybe the term recursive is not the good one, but I was very much influenced by the standard of requirement engineering. Okay. And if I can find the picture, I will show to you later. Okay, trying to find where.
Okay, you were looking for another one than the one that you had on slide 42.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. No, honestly, I would actually say I would have thought recursive is like Towers of Hanoi or something like that, where you have really the same thing again, just on a smaller level. This what to me looks a bit like it is. Well, basically, you have systems and subsystems and models and submodels, so you have a kind of hierarchy, which is fair enough. But maybe there's more definitions of recursive than the one that I have been raised with.
Yeah, exactly.
But now I understand what you mean. That is very helpful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Many thanks, Kai, and many thanks, Antonio. Let's see if there is somebody else. One thing which I want to stress that Antonio is always willing to involve people in all of the activities he does. So this is also relevant for us internally. I encourage those that are from within cybersecurity to get in touch with Antonio. Also for those, I have been personally involved by Antonio, for instance, also on the smart cities guidelines, which he mentioned. We had the possibility to discuss, and I added some input to the exercise in which is involved there. Thank you.
Maybe I should mention that this alliance I'm mentioning, since I mentioned it's very close to an open source facility, and I didn't mention, but Eclipse is member of the don't see the okay. Eclipse is member of the project, and they're interested to run the alliance. Okay, so we'll see if this is really what we need to do in the future. Okay. So this is okay.
If there's not an immediate question immediately, I would have another one maybe, because first actually what I forgot and was when I was running, and is actually I forgot to introduce Lina Kam, who is actually the work package leader of work package 8, the standardization work package. She's also the liaison officer or the liaison representative from CyberSec for Europe to Working Group 5 in SC27. I think, Antonio, you have met in Paris, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably, yeah.
If you had time there with all of your hosting duties to meet her. Anyway, Lina is basically running the standardization stuff in CyberSec for Europe, but maybe we can convince her even to show up and say something. But she's really a core person here. And the other thing I wanted to mention, as you were mentioning many of your activities in terms of collaboration, what CyberSec for Europe is going to do beyond the deliverables that you've seen already is also going to make an assessment of committees and with regard to what European strategy with regard to them should be and whether they actually, let's say, have European values incorporated in a proper fashion. And so IC20, of course, ISO IEC JTC1 will be under assessment, but also other committees. And I was wondering whether maybe you can put up the slide again that you showed where all of these ones that you're involved with and the initiatives are on. And because that may inspire us to come to you and interview at some point in time on any of your experiences. Or maybe if you have experiences, one of these platforms that could be of interest. And of course, yes, maybe if you see.
What is the names? I forgot.
I think that was when you introduced yourself. Yes, that was, I think, the long list of where all of these committees that you're having experience with. Somewhere in the beginning, I think slide 5 maybe or 3 or so.
Oh, you mean this one? This one? Or
At
the
the moment
other?
we see your slide overview. Let me have a quick look here. I meant well, actually, there's slide number 3 and number 4 are probably the most interesting.
Or
Maybe
this one?
number 4 more, yes.
This one or
This
the
one,
fourth?
yes. This one, actually, this one has all the ISO IEC stuff in it, and then 3, yes, there was several of them, yes. So this is actually all the ISO IEC systems, then yes, but you also had these other experiences. Anyway, you see, and Antonio is extremely experienced in many of these things. And yes, maybe also the number 3, the one with your photo.
Okay.
But one can see that you're also active in the AIoT liaison, so that is industry. So you have some industry consortia effects and so on. So if somebody has an idea and any kind of things to ask Antonio, he's probably Antonio is always a good source of knowledge here. That is where I saw it. I mean, because Antonio is basically involved in standardization, both in the ISO IEC system that we mainly know from with our relation to SC27, but then also all sorts of other activities. And if you see another slide where this is coming through more, of course, it is also welcome to look at. But what is maybe then what is your experience now with all of these different systems? What makes you go to those committees that you're actually going and not going to others?
There are two things that are important. One is when you go to standardization, you have an idea of where the wind is blowing. Okay, and I give you an example, which unfortunately I'm not involved, but 27701. Which is the extension of 2702 concerning privacy, the PIMS, the Privacy Information System. When you started, you saw that the rush of the standardization people, like 50 people working together, okay? And so this is important, and you can see that at some point the market is mature, and then suddenly you have an effort, okay? So this is important. You have this notion, okay? This is the first thing that I personally like, okay, to know where the wind is blowing. The second thing is you have a reference that you can use without being ambiguous, because it's also disambiguating the terminology and the concepts, the standardization, okay? So we're using the same term, we use this, and we can refer to it, so that actually, and if I'm saying I'm using this term because actually it is in the standard, it's easier than saying, okay, I'm explaining this term because I prefer it and because I have that, okay? So this is exactly the reason why I'm working in standardization. It's a real representation. It's nearly a digital twin, if I say so, of the reality. Okay, and for business, it's extremely interesting. Okay, of course, in order to do this, and this is a little bit, but maybe my default is I'm not focusing only on one. If you specialize too much on one, of course you are good on this one standard. I'm more or less involved in the ecosystem understanding. Okay, and this is why I came with all those standards. Okay, because they are very much, let's say, providing to me the landscape of the thing. Okay. So, and this is also the reason why I was the first to mention the problem of ecosystem. You might not, you were not there, but 3 years ago, in CPDP, there was a panel on the standardization, and Jan, your colleague, Jan Schalabek was there, plus some people from Microsoft and things like that, okay? And they were mentioning how it worked, and I asked the question, we are having standards for organizations, but we don't have standards for ecosystems, okay? And I asked Jan what's his opinion, and Jan was surprised, and he told me I cannot answer that one. But later he came to me and he said, yes, I know the answer. We need to it's going to take us a number of years before this is really visible, okay? And actually, in reality, when you look at the standards, many of them include consideration of ecosystem. It just is not stated, okay? The most interesting one is SC38, okay? Because in SC38, they have a statement where they say, this is for organizations, and they say, but it's also for ecosystems, and we take the assumption that an organization is equal to an ecosystem. which I think is not correct. But they wanted to, in one shot, to say, yes, by the way, this standard is for ecosystems, not organizations. Okay, and when you read a reference architecture standard, it's very hard to understand how it is profitable to you as an organization, because in general, it explains the value of the ecosystem. Okay, for instance, an IoT reference architecture is explaining the device, the edge computing, the cloud computing, the AI stuff. So it's explaining different things, how you put them together. Okay, it's very rare. You can only have the GAFAs, and even them, they don't implement everything. So they only implement one part of it. Okay, and this is the issue with the standard today. We will read them from organization point of view, but we also should read them from an ecosystem point of view. Hopefully, this gives you at least the reason why I'm so involved. Okay, it's because of this ecosystem problem.
I think we could have felt also the enthusiasm that Antonio has in his involvement in through the different committees, which is of course also very important given the challenges of dealing with so many people trying to draft text together, getting to a solution, and so on. You also need that enthusiasm there. I think that there is. Yes, still some time for one question. Yes, Dirk, you have the last word here, the last question. So,
well, I don't want to have the last word. I hope Antonio will be the one who has the last word. But Antonio, as you mentioned, ecosystems and organizations, this is really a crucial question. You mentioned the Eclipse Foundation that you may use as some kind of link point into the open source communities and initiatives. I'm just wondering about some more general ideas about the interactions, because there's a huge amount of work going on. For example, in the context of the Linux Foundation, you've just seen the inauguration of the Open Source Security Foundation, for example, that also deals with tooling. There's Open Risk. You have the automotive Linux initiatives and Open Chain and what have you. So all these are driven by players, constitute ecosystems, and will, if they want or not, set at least pragmatic standards. So how do you see the interaction point? Is interaction with Eclipse good enough in order to involve all this work?
Yeah, that's exactly an issue. So we need to make this happen. And of course, each of those foundations, alliance, they have their own objective to serve their own objectives. Okay. When it comes to privacy, I thought if I had the means, I would provide mine. But I figure out that it's easier to leverage, let's say, something existing. Eclipse happens to be, I would say Eclipse, the good thing about them is they're very much engineering oriented. There are lots of things for engineers. And so, and our project was actually PDB4E, and the E was for engineers, okay? So we're focusing on that. But I recognize that we will have to have a link with all the other things, including the Linux Foundation is doing so many great things. Some of the things they don't standardize. I give you an example. So the cybersecurity of open source, we have no guidance. Okay, the guidance is only, and actually because I have a project with a company that is trying to figure out how he will handle cybersecurity, and we just realized that. They don't have their practice, but are they good practices? We don't know. Okay. Well, for Linux Foundation, very likely it's good practices. Okay, but this is not standardized, and there might be some minimum things to do when you go into open source. Okay, so I would say yes. The answer is we need to be careful and to be open to something where we can include all those things. Okay, so I don't want to be just Eclipse completing with others. No, it's not the reason. It's really initially the community, okay, and the community is open to everyone, every solutions. So I just want to make sure that there is a vector mechanisms to make it happen, okay. And since the governance part of open source is something that is very specialized, we need to work on with specialized people, okay. This is how Eclipse is on board, okay. But I have also contacted Oasis, okay. Oasis is a standardization organization, private, but they also do things related to open source or open initiatives. Okay, so any organization can fit basically, as long as they can help create the stuff and bootstrap, kickstart the thing.
Thanks, Antonio and Dirk. We have reached our allocated time. I want to thank you again, Antonio, for being here. I don't know if our VP8 leader, Lina, wants to conclude this webinar, which of course will be not our last webinar, but it's just the first of a series that we plan to restart in the next new year. Lina or Kai, do you have any final word for the people that join us today?
So thank you all for participating. Look forward to notices about the next webinar in the series. We already have ideas for the next few, and hopefully the next one will be about Stand ICT and its open calls and their observatory that they're working on, and the next one after that will be about certification and the status of certificates and how to maybe organize them better so that they would be better machine readable. And thank you, Antonio, for starting off our lecture series. After this, so a couple of the webinars will be about standardization, and after that, I think we will also have some other topics. So yes. So here's hoping that this it was a very good start, and let's hope that the rest of the series will also be as interesting and will turn out good. Well. Thank you.
Lina, just quickly, was January 20 already something that people should put in the pencil in their calendars for the next webinar?
Yes, we were talking about the 20th of January, yes, as the next date. But as I don't have it agreed upon yet, then it's, let's say, save the date and we will let you know.
See, because okay, that is actually hitting the German mirror committee of SC27 meeting. But
okay, but we
anyway,
can.
but it will be in January, probably, or February, the next one. That
I think we can circulate
the
date in the next few days so that everybody can note this down.
Exactly.
So thank you very much again, and the registration will be available on thanks to the work of our VP9, David and Christine, which I also thank. They have greatly contributed to the organization of this webinar. The recording will be available on the Cybersec for Europe website, and Antonio will also make the slides available. So thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here with us. Stay safe and enjoy, if you can, next holiday season. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas to all.
Bye-bye. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Bye.